So at this point, like I did state earlier, we're just gonna go ahead and put grease all up along the teeth of the bevel gear. If you do need to, you can just go ahead and wipe some excess grease off to start semi-fresh and rotate as needed. You can just put it directly on, but we do typically recommend just actually applying it via your finger. It does get better into the grooves than just applying globs of it. We're going to continue applying grease, and we're also going to be applying it onto the plastic bevel gear itself. And once you have finished applying it, make sure that there is some excess amount of grease along where the teeth would be aligning from the bevel gear, the plastic bevel gear, and the metal bevel gear. So please ensure that there's an excess amount there only. Everywhere else just needs to have some grease, that way in case that little glob there dries up or gets a little contaminated, it should be all right. And then just rotate the main shaft to let the grease spread throughout the teeth. You're just going to rotate it about 3 to 4 times, and once you've completed that, we have completed a bevel gear change. So now you can go ahead and just grab your knife rod, and you can go ahead and just place it back. So what we're going to do for placing it is just put it inside the groove here. I'm going to put it in this groove and just slide it along, making sure that we lower it and raise it as needed. And it should just be smooth sailing until you get to the end. Once you get to the end, just use your hand and pull it up as needed. And then once you have it out, you can go ahead and align it properly and then let it fall into its groove. Once it's fallen into its groove, you can go ahead and grab your cover. The cover here, in this case, is going to be this one. I'm just going to put everything back together. I'm going to do 4 screws here. Go ahead and tighten them. I typically do recommend going in a zigzag pattern or across from whatever object you're tightening for screwing anything down. That's only just to apply even pressure throughout the entire object. And then, mind you, I'm not doing a full tighten screw, I'm just putting it in there. And then once I have everything in place, then I'll go ahead and finish doing a tighten down. So now you can go ahead with the tightening, finish tighten. And once you have it finished tightened, go ahead, pull the photographer back down towards you. here you can actually go ahead and reach it forward and try to align the knife correctly. And once you have it in place, grab your cover. Keep in mind that on your cover there is going to be a red point on both sides, so that you can actually just go ahead and put it in whichever way. But before you actually do put it in whichever way, do keep in mind of the middle screw. The middle screw is typically on the left hand side if you're on the back of the machine. If you're looking at it from the front of the machine, it's going to be on your right hand side. So you're just going to make sure to slide it in correctly to where the middle screw is on your left. If you are on the back of the machine, if you're on the front, go ahead and line it up for the right. And then once you have everything in place, that's when you can go with the screwdriver again and finish tightening or putting down the last of the screws. For this item, I would just recommend just tightening them down as you are doing each screw. So rather than using the screwdriver that we were using just now, we're going to be going ahead and using this little one, as this is a tight area to reach. And then we're going to go ahead and tighten it down. Okay. And then we'll go to the front of the machine from here. So once again, at this point, you're going to be using these two tools for the most part. But before we actually continue with anything, we are going to have to discuss with regards to setting your hook timing. Since we did remove the hook, now we need to actually put it back on, and the timing does need to be correct. So for hook timing, it is a little tricky, but we're hopefully going to be able to get you guys through it. So for step one would actually be to go ahead and grab your hook and just go ahead and slide it back into place. It's a little tight, so that does tell me one of the screws, just most likely while moving around, got a little tighter. So we're just going to go ahead and loosen everything back up again. And before we go ahead and put it back in, we can just go give it a little drop of oil just to let everything get refurbished a little bit or revamped. So go ahead and just slide your hook in place. And now what we're going to be looking to do at this point is set the hook timing. So this is going to be the hook that you're going to be putting into your machine. And what you're primarily going to be looking out for whenever you're putting in the machine or putting this into your machine is this hook here, or that point there. That point is going to be what we're primarily going to be looking out for whenever we're setting the hook timing. Everything else, like this protective shell, we just need to ensure is down, and from there we can begin setting the timing for the machine. So go ahead and slide it in, making sure that you have a point facing towards the needle. And then we can go ahead with lowering the main shaft and controlling the protective layer. Because what we're trying to do what we're going to be trying to do is lower the needle down to the lowest point, and then slowly raising the needle back up and aligning the point to the back of the needle. So what you're going to be looking for, or what you're going to be doing with regards to the main shaft, is you want the needle to come down, and just as it comes up, you want to try to align that point that we had talked about to be just behind, or just at the eye of the needle. And when it is at that position, that is when we can go ahead and begin the timing of the hook. So if you take a look at now, you will notice that the hook timing, or that the needle has been dropped already, and it is just behind the hook at this current time. So what we're gonna do is move the point upwards towards the needle. We're gonna actually want it to be just touching the needle. For this one, the needle is actually too low, so I'm gonna go ahead and raise it just a hair. And once you get it to be just right, that's when it's a little tricky, as you are gonna need to push the needle. Give the needle a little push or a nudge with the flathead to move the hook itself back just enough to where there's some wiggle room whenever you are doing hats. So once again, what we're looking to do now is we have the needle down, we have the eye of the needle just behind the hook point that we had talked about. And now what we're looking to do is give the needle a push to move the hook back just a few millimeters, just enough to where we can actually utilize and ensure that the needle has some wiggle room, some area that it can actually move in without actually causing thread breaks if you were to do hats or flats. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and just apply the slightest amount of pressure so that I can see that the needle is moving. But in my situation here, I've actually gone ahead and did the correct by applying the correct amount of pressure on the needle, but the hook itself rotated to the left too much. So now the point of the hook is past the needle. So in this case, what you're gonna have to do is realign the hook and then bring it back up against the needle. Line it up against the needle's eye, and then just do the exact same thing, except this time not hitting the hook to where it moves off of position. And right now is actually in a good spot. So once you have it in a good spot, locate the screw, And without moving the hook, go ahead and tighten that screw down. So I've gone ahead and lined everything up and tightened the screw, one screw on the hook. So what we're gonna go ahead and do is just rotate the main shaft. Also use the flathead screwdriver that you were just using and hold the guard downwards. That way it does not hit the needle. Wrong way. That's also the wrong way because I'm going the wrong way. And now you can hold the main shaft in this position and just give the needle a little bit of a tap just to make sure that you have some wiggle room behind it. What you're looking for primarily is going to be that the needle moves front and back in a slight amount, and if it does, then you're go ahead and locate the next screw by rotating the main shaft and tightening it down. What we're going to do once again is just going to be placing the hook point just before the eye of the needle comes up. So as the eye of the needle comes up, you're going to go ahead and place that point on the hook just before it comes up fully. You do want, whenever you're first doing it, you do want to have zero space between the hook and the needle. This is just so that you can actually utilize a tool to help push the hook back and actually get the proper timing done correctly. Once you have everything in place, you're going to go ahead and tighten down one of the screws. And typically you're going to see on the hook there's a flat area. That's going to usually be your first screw. So you're just going to tighten that down as hard as you can without moving the hook and making sure it gets out of position. And then what I typically do recommend at this point is to go ahead and just do a full test on the main shaft itself. So you're gonna spin the full machine fully. And whenever you do this test of spinning the machine, you do want to hold the guard downwards. That way it does not actually get in the way of the hook itself. Make sure that the hook is spinning to the left and continue testing. And you want to make sure that that point comes back up right behind the needle, the eye of the needle, that there's some space. Like this amount of wiggle room. I'll get it close in shortly. And you can do this spinning test just twice, making sure that it's not out of time. And so the needle just went fully down into its dead zone. And now we're just gonna be lifting it back up. As it lifts up, the point on that hook that we're looking for is gonna just arrive right behind the eye of the needle. And that is where we want it. And then we do want some wiggle room behind the behind the needle and the hook. So the needle should have some wiggle room to where, in cases of it going through a hat that is very difficult for it, the needle can just wiggle or bend its way through. And I will go ahead and give you a further close up. So what I'm doing next to control the main shaft is that I have a Allen key connected to the main shaft key hole, and I'm just rotating it to rotate the main shaft, and don't have enough hands, but we're gonna go ahead, rotate it to the left hand side, then we're gonna bring it back down. In this case, you're gonna be holding this guard downwards, that way there's sufficient enough space for the hook to go through, and just keep rotating. I'm gonna go ahead and rotate this further. And once that point comes up, you can see it there arriving. And it just reaches behind the needle. So that is the point that you're trying to look for the hook timing. It is staying stationary for a moment, so I'll go ahead and show you the wiggle room. Mind you, the hook is going forward. That is because it is to go forward. But if we were to actually hold it aligned to each other, it is just before the needle, the eye of the needle comes up. And if we look at it from the side, you can see that there's just a little bit of a gap, but it's enough of a gap to where the needle can actually move, and that is what you're trying to achieve. So a little trick that you can do, since you do have a multi-head, is actually going to be utilizing the head next to what your hook timing, you're changing or adjusting the hook timing for. So what you're going to be wanting to do is just also take apart the head, or take apart the needle plate and remove the support here. We're primarily just using it to observe, so you don't actually have to take off everything, just enough to where you can actually see the needle drop down, where exactly it's dropping on the needle, and then you can even utilize it to find the correct amount of wiggle room that you need for your machine. And once you have that information, you can go back to the head that you were working on. And adjust as needed. So in my case, I do need to adjust the timing to be a little bit further back. So I've gone ahead and taken off the one screw that I had tightened, and I'm gonna go adjust it for distance now. And once you've adjusted for distance, go ahead and just press it down, making sure not to move it. Check for distance again once you press it down to ensure that you have the correct distance, and then go ahead and just tighten one screw and tighten it down. And then at this point, you can go ahead and just double check with the other head that you were utilizing. In this case, it would be head 1 for me. I would just go ahead and double check the distance, making sure that the distance is set correctly. So when I speak the distance, I do mean whenever you push on the needle, making sure and ensuring that it does move. A certain amount of distance, and then ensuring back onto the head that you were just working on. Ensuring that this hook also has that same amount of distance and wiggle room. And if it doesn't, go ahead and just adjust as needed. In this case, if I can find a screw, there we go. I'm gonna go ahead and loosen it. And then once again, line it up. I'm gonna actually push it in slightly, and now I'm gonna go ahead and tighten it down just slightly. That way I can push it back without worrying too much with regards to the whole thing changing its adjustment. So now I'll just get I tightened it too tight, so I'm gonna go ahead and loosen it. With one finger, I'm just gonna hold it that way it doesn't move, and then tighten it down officially. And finish tighten it. Check the distance once again, just to ensure that the distance is all correct, and then you can go ahead and locate the remaining screws and tightening them down as well. Once you finish tightening it down, it's just going to be a matter of putting everything back together, and I will show that shortly. So we've gone ahead and just set the timing for the machine, or for the hook timing. We've gone and set that. I'm certain that Dylan will be able to provide a more detailed explanation as well as a more detailed video on how to actually set it up. But once that we have it all set up, we can go ahead and put the hook guards back on. I did already go ahead and put the support on and tighten it. So this is already good to go straight in. And then since I have the needle plate off, I'll just give it a little wipe with the rag, clean that excess oil off. Okay, so What we'll do is raise the needle, make sure it's up. Then what we can go ahead and do is put the guards back on. It would be best to first identify which guard goes in which location for left and right side. And once you actually have it, just place it in the general area or its general direction, like over here on the left hand side and the right hand side. And then we'll place the needle there. So for the screws that we're looking for the smaller screws of the remaining screws that we have left. And it's just going to be grab your guard and or piece, grab a single screw. I tend to put the screw into the guard itself first, and then I'll tighten it down onto the machine. That way it's not so difficult because it is such a small screw. And then just tighten it down. Then just grab the second screw and tighten that down as well. These don't actually have to be super tight, but just tight enough to where they won't just slip off on their own as the machine is running. Next, we'll do the same on the other side, and then we'll be putting the needle plate on. Now we're going to go ahead and put the needle plate on. For the needle plate, since we do have 3 remaining screws, we're going to also just slide the needle plate on. Then we'll grab our Z tool and or our little double-sided tool here. I would just drop these screws into place. And I will do the same on the other side. This screw here is actually the incorrect screw, so I'll actually lift the whole plate up just to grab that screw and drop it. So now we can go ahead and just place the plate on top. And I will also be placing the last screw, which is for the neck, on there where it needs to go. So now it's just tightening those screws down, and from there you have completed your machine. And once you've been able to complete all that, you have completed that head. And then you can continue to the next one should it require it as well. And just like that, you'll have the machine working all over again. But remember to put the grease, reassemble everything. Do put a little bit of oil in the hook. And once everything's been assembled, make sure you do a test. Mind you, you do want to do a test or large design similar to this one that has more than, I think this one has more than 8,000 stitches or 80,000 stitches. So you do want to actually use a large design. That way you could test the bevel here, making sure that it's actually been set properly, and it'll run through everything just to test it. Once the testing has been completed, then you can actually go ahead and utilize the machine as intended.